Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by doing as others have done and thanking the officials who assisted the Select Committee in our consideration of this bill, the submitters who I think it would be fair to say put into us 13 splendid submissions, and thank my colleagues from the Select Committee and I share Ruth Dyson's praise for the role that Paul Hutchison as chair had played. I also want to single out, given the circumstances this afternoon, one of our colleagues from the Health Select Committee, the Honourable Louis Manaval Winnie Laban, and say to Winnie, a big whawhatai lover, thank you for everything that you've done and best wishes for your future. The Green Party supported this bill at first reading and will continue to support it. In particular, we support the underlying intent of the bill. And we do so with some reservations, but the ideas of enhancing quality and safety through the creation of the Commission is a good idea, and the idea of enhancing the effectiveness of the New Zealand healthcare system through greater collaboration is also an important idea that everybody shares. In relation to the Quality and Safety Commission, if I could begin there, I had the good fortune to represent district health boards on the Quality Improvement Committee, and so was part of the development of a number of these quality improvement projects. And I certainly welcome this exciting development, actually, this great enhancement of this area of work. There are two reservations I want to voice in this debate. The first of those was picking up on a point made by the IHC in their submission to the Select Committee. One of the things that has happened in the field of disability, and in particular in the field of intellectual disability, is that we have focused on what the goal of disability support services might be. And in particular, there was a groundbreaking report from the National Health Committee called To Live an Ordinary Life. And what that set out was a goal for intellectual disability support services of, in fact, ordinariness. Ordinariness is the goal of those services. And so what IHC was saying to us was that a residential service that has as its intent providing an ordinary living situation for people with intellectual disability is a very different kind of service to a clinical service that's intended to repair illness. And so I think it will indeed be a challenge for the new Commission to think through what quality and safety means for a service that has such a different goal to the clinical services that will make up the bulk of its work. So that's one reservation. The second reservation, I think, is a more deep-seated one, and one that will be the subject of a supplementary order paper from the Green Party in the committee stage. And that is the intent that's set out in Clause 13 of the bill for the Quality and Safety Commission to become self-funding. We believe that is fundamentally wrong. That while the argument for self-funding, that this will increase relevance of the Commission's work and buy-in to that work from the health sector, while that's an admirable argument and one that we would support, the dangers are also great. The danger is that if the Commission is set up to become self-funding, that will in fact pervert and change the actions both of the Commission and of service providers. That the Commission will focus on those projects that lend themselves most readily to generating income, and that providers will tend to pick up those projects that are free or do not incur a cost. Now, neither of those behaviours is necessarily what we want. So the Green Party will be moving an SOP to remedy that situation. I want to come to collaboration, and I enjoyed Paul Hutchison's journey through the changes in the health sector over the last several decades. I had the dubious pleasure of living through most of them in positions in the health sector, and I think what that history shows us is several things. First of all, for me, it reinforces the adage that structure should follow function. And in the health sector, we've seen a lot of structural change that has not been driven by that principle, but is instead the result of ideological change or ideological belief. And I think it would be disappointing if we were to see more of that kind of change in the sector. So what sort of function or service do we actually require in the New Zealand health sector? And I'd suggest that some services, public health services, as Ian Lees-Galloway's talked about, primary health services, lend themselves to highly localised structures, whereas other services, tertiary and quaternary services, the most specialised services, lend themselves to much bigger units of organisation. So I've previously in the House set out my view that actually what that suggests is that what we need for structure is an intelligent network of locally organised structures that are able to aggregate where function determines that that's a sensible thing to do. And I think we are moving towards it. I don't agree with Paul Hutchison's view that collaboration has not been occurring in the sector. It has been occurring, and there's been some important gains. But it's been limited by a few things. It's been limited by what I call asymmetry of need, where smaller DHBs have required the collaboration and larger DHBs in general have not. And it's been limited by an interpretation of the Act that suggests that each DHB should only act in its own interest. And so there hasn't been a driver that's in the interest of the overall New Zealand public. So we support the idea of greater collaboration that can be directed by the Minister that's in this bill. We think that's the appropriate way to go. But we share the concern that's been set out by the Labour members about the other thing that this bill does that wasn't signalled really in the first reading debate, and that was to diminish the requirement for consultation that's imposed on DHBs. And certainly we will be talking with our Labour colleagues around the SOP that they intend to put forward and intend to work for a change to the legislation in the committee stage. A couple of reasons really. One is that the approach that's outlined by the Minister in this debate of setting out the requirements for consultation through regulation is bad law. It's bad law, sir. The consultation requirement ought to be set out in the Act itself. And then the interpretation of the Act should guide the proportionality of the consultation that then occurs. Because this is what the government members say. They say, if you have the consultation requirement spelled out in the Act, then DHBs will be forced into consultation that's out of proportion to the issue involved. In fact, that's not the case, sir. The Court of Appeal already has set out the law that applies here, and it actually does impose precisely the kind of proportionality we would want to see. So there is no good reason for not including it in the Act itself, and we'll be working for that in the bill. So in summary, sir, the Green Party will support this bill to the committee stage, but we'll be working for some significant changes to it in the committee stage. And we hope it will be possible to eventually pass a bill unanimously in the House, sir. Thank you.
I call Rahui